So, okay, I've done that. So, thank you very much for being here. My name is Ibrahim Aziz, and I'm your host for this meeting this evening. And I'm really pleased to welcome you all to this very first online VDGS meeting for 2021. Tonight, I'm particularly delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Jonathan Dunford from Paris, and also Sylvia Abramowicz, who will be assisting him in his proceedings tonight. He'll be talking about the Villeneuve Manuscript, a fascinating document that has only recently surfaced in a Parisian auction house. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what Jonathan has to say about this book. Firstly, I've got a couple of announcements to say. The first announcement is to do with the next online session, which is due to happen next week on Tuesday, on February the 2nd at 11:30 a.m. UK time. And this is a technique session led by Peter Wendland. This session is open to all VDGS members, and if you would like to join, you need to send an email to ukvdgs@gmail.com. And this is just a way of letting us, the organizers, know how many people will turn up and the sort of file they will have with them on the day. The next online session following that is a young players platform, and this will take place on the 23rd of February at 8 p.m. UK time, also a Tuesday, I think. And the Young Players platform is really a recital to feature an upcoming professional viola da gamba player. And our young player for this month is Rowan Bitmead. So I hope you will show your support by joining me for that session at the end of February. Details of these sessions, past and present and future, can be seen on the VDGS website, vdgs.org.uk. The other announcement I would like to make is to do with the membership survey, and I should have it here somewhere. It looks something like that. Probably can't see it, but this is a document that you can download from the website, and basically it is a feedback form that will be useful for the committee members so that we can improve the way the society is run and know a little bit about what you as members expect to get from your yearly subscription. So it is really for you. Do take the time to fill it in and return it to us either by email or by more traditional means. So with regards to tonight's session, as I have mentioned to some of you joining earlier, you are all muted at the moment. And if you can just kindly make sure that you are muted, because if you're not, then you could be the main speaker. And this is a recorded meeting, recorded for posterity. And you do have the option of unmuting. And you need to know where this button is, because if you have any questions, you need to unmute yourself. I would recommend that you do not unmute yourself at the beginning of the session and save this till later on when Jonathan will tell you when it is a good moment to start a question and answer and discussion session. I think that's all that I need to say at this present moment. So all there is to say left is for you all to just sit back, relax, and enjoy. And I'm now going to hand over to Jonathan. Jonathan.
Can you all hear me? Yes, thumbs up or not? Very good. The sound is good. Eve, does it sound good?
Yeah. Can you? I'm going to unmute. I'm going to mute myself now. Bye.
Oh, no. Maybe you should leave it on, because if you need to tell me if there's a problem, technical problem, it'd be good that you'll be there.
Okay, then we'll do.
Just don't talk.
Okay.
So, very glad to speak to you about this manuscript, which has been a large part of my preoccupations in my life for the last 2 years, and it's a real pleasure because I see not only are people all over the world, but I have a lot of my colleagues who are as competent as I, And this will be an incredible opportunity, which I've been waiting for, to discuss this manuscript, which is, I think, one of the most important manuscripts for the viol, and maybe just for music, in that we've required in this, maybe this century, I'd say. I'm not exaggerating. So my presentation will be in 3 parts. The first part, I'll have this introduction, which will talk about how we acquired the manuscript, what the manuscript contains, other details where you can find it, and about the facsimile edition, which is coming out by our French Viola da Gamba Society. Then I'll have a slideshow so you can actually see what the thing looks like and see examples of music. And the third part, which will be musical examples, which thank God Sylvia is here, because I have to be geeking sound engineering and talking about this. So she will be playing a few extracts from the manuscript so you'll understand better what this is all about. So when it gets to the part where Sylvia plays, she'll play, and then I'll put up a slide. And when I put up the slide again, then everybody can ask questions. So nobody should talk, please, until Sylvia has finished playing the very first extract, which should be here in maybe 15 or 20 minutes. So I'm sure a lot of you people have already read the article that we published for the journal, the VGS journal. But for you, those who have not, I'm not going to read the text, but I'll give you a little summary of what happened. The first thing was that here in France, often we have manuscripts that come up at auction. We've been very lucky because we've had one manuscript that was not even auctioned that was here in our house for quite a while. And my politics about manuscripts in general is that I think they're for everybody, and they're not to be kept at home where they're not seen. Same thing for paintings or whatever. So when these manuscripts come up, I try my best that they're acquired by a library that will scan them or put them up on the internet or make an edition or whatever. So this manuscript, I had a very dear friend who passed away a few years ago, very tragically, at a young age. His name was Xavier Bonnet, and Xavier Bonnet was an expert on 17th and 18th century archives, and he was a restorer of upholstery, but also he restored the castle here in France in Voltaire, but also worked at the White House. He actually met Michelle Obama and whatever. He was restoring the Blue Room. And Xavier loved finding things, because he was always at the auctions buying things for his restoration projects. And he sent me a text message rather late at night. It was about 11 o'clock at night. And I was, of course, watching a film on Netflix. That's very serious, isn't it? And I got this text message, oh no, Xavier again found some stupid thing, painting that's not interesting. And it said Marais' best works. And we get these all the time. There's many, many books of Marais' best works copied after Marais' death. It's not common, but it happens often. So I was not really that interested in looking at it, but luckily Sylvia was there, and she looked at the internet and said, you've got to look at this. So the very next day, we went to the auction house, which is the Drouot auction house, the big one down near the Opéra, the opera in Paris. And there was hundreds of books being sold, a lot of things much more important than Marais. There was Brassens, there was Berg, there was Debussy manuscripts being sold. In the middle of all these hundreds of books, there was a book of Marais, that was the Marais' best pieces with ornaments. And the book was huge. I've worked often in archives, but they're the size of not of a music book, but a legal book. That means that it's a ledger the size that you see in 17th century ledgers. The exact size was, I can give you it down here. The size, it was 42.5 by 28.5 centimeters. Maybe you're still in inches in England, but it's huge and a very heavy book. What was really interesting about the book, besides the fact that it was extremely beautiful, and was that the person who had copied Marais' music had copied it with a very, very beautiful calligraphy that was up to par, at least with Marais' printed editions, in such a way that my friend Christophe Coin, who we worked with on the manuscript in the beginning, thought that it was the same printer that had copied it out, and we found out later that was not the case. But it was an extremely incredible work that must have taken years and years and years of copying out, and careful calligraphy without one single mistake. What was also very interesting is that the person who copied this manuscript was very, very careful to copy out exactly all of the indications that Marais had put in his original books. That means every fingering was there, exactly in the same place. Every ornament symbol, exactly in the same place. And you know, as you must know, Marais had this symbol E, which means in French it's called exprimer enflé or expression. In English, we usually call it an enflé, but that's not what Marais always called it, but whatever. But that E was sometimes at the beginning of the note or the middle of the note or the end of the note. Marais specifies that in his third book of Pièces de Viol. And the person who copied it out was incredibly careful to put that E exactly where it was in the original book. So, I mean, just for somebody who's copying out music, it was already amazing. But what was all much more amazing than just the fact he was so careful to make a sort of 18th century photocopy of the book, he added almost 300, I repeat, 300 symbols in this book, some of which are explained very carefully in a preface. And the other ones, as you go through the pieces, there's hundreds of pieces, there 256, I think it is, in the manuscript. 203 pieces in score form, all from all 5 books of Marais, 203 pieces in score form. When he copied these things out, he added all these extra symbols to them, and little by little, as you go through the book, the symbols and the explanations get more and more complicated. Sometimes he harps on one point, and it makes very clear that he's harping on a bow technique or a left-hand technique, but it's really rather exceptional. And I'll show you later the picture of the book and the table, but the table doesn't do justice to all the symbols because I said there's 300 and the table talks about a dozen, some of which are repeated directly from Marais' own book. Once I talked to the auctioneer was not very interested in the book because people were interested in the Debussy for the National Library here, or Berg, or Brassens, and he said, nobody's interested in this book. I don't know, I put 400 euros on it. Nobody's going to buy it. If nobody's interested in such a book. And I, as I said at the beginning, my politics are that this book was for humanity and especially for viol players. And I wanted to be bought by viol players. So I said to the auctioneer, I'd like to have this bought by viol players from all over the world. Do you think if I put this up, well, how would I go about this? He said, well, you should probably do something on the internet. And he said to me, if you do this, the price is going to shoot up. And he'd say, what did he say? It was 12,000, 14,000 euros. He said, we go for it. I said, my God, I don't have that money. But I put it up on Facebook, and lo and behold, I found people from really all over the world, Japan, the United States, France, England, all of Europe. People gave money, and we got up to quite a large sum to acquire the book. The book actually went, after all the expenses at the auction house, for 22,000 euros. It was a lot more than the 400 euros. And so some way, this is the second time this has happened to me. I think the next time that I'm at auction and nobody's interested, I think I'll buy the damn thing and scan it myself and put it up on EMSLP, and it'll be finished. But in any case, it was acquired by the French Viola da Gamba Society at Christophe Coin. And as I said, Christophe is on the point of having the first volume of the facsimile edition ready. We'll have to find out some way. Krista was supposed to contact you guys in England about this, but you'll figure out, and soon there will be a facsimile edition of this book. And once all the editions are out, because the original book is, as I said, all 5 books of Marais pieces, and they're classified by tonalité. What did I forget that in English?
Keys.
What?
Keys?
Keys. My French wife speaks English better than I do. By different keys. So once that they're all out, the facsimile edition is out, they'll put it up on Gallica on the Bibliothèque Nationale, and everybody can consult it online, but that will take a number of years. There are 4 unedited pieces, which I'll get to later in the book. One of the unedited pieces is in another book, and we'll talk about that a bit later. I'll just briefly touch on Marais, because I think everybody here knows who Marais is. Marais was born in 1656, and he died in 1728. He printed 5 books of viol music. what's a little less known, and I think my colleagues know this very well, that Marais did write out manuscript music when he was a young man as a student, probably, and gave copies of them to Scottish noblemen, Harry and James Maule. And those manuscripts ended up in the Scottish National Library, which they're still today. Two of the manuscripts are actually Marais' own handwriting. And why I'm talking about this is because Marais, when he was a young man, before he printed his music and he's writing out his own handwriting, was already using these fingerings, symbols, and everything. And what's amazing is that one of his close friends, Jean Dieu Saint-Jean, who was a painter, painted a portrait of Marais, which we find in the castle of Blois. And in the painting, he painted every last ornament, fingering in Marais' music with his portrait. So obviously, Marais was very concerned about trying to transmit, as a pedagogical reason mostly, his desiderata for viol players, and even his painter friend realized this. Now, getting to the article again, I wrote the part about the acquisition and about the symbols. My dear friend François-Pierre Gois, who's very, I would say, he's almost the head of the Bibliothèque Nationale in France. He wrote the article with me, and he found some amazing things about the manuscript that I had not seen, of course, because first thing is that the manuscript now, which was a very large manuscript, was very, very difficult to find a way to scan it. And what happened was we tried to find different places in France to scan it, and nobody could figure out how to get such a big book on a scanner. So finally, what happened was the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, the National Library here in Paris, acquired it. That's why it's going to be digitized there. It has been digitized, but it's not available except if you're a French Viola de Gamma member to consult it for the time being. The shelf mark, if you can consult my article at the journal, but I'll give it to you if you want to jot it down, it's Reserve VMA Manuscript 94.4. If you want to consult it, you have to join our society and make an appointment, but people have done that already. Now, this book was owned by somebody, and his name was written on the front cover. It was written ex libris, which means from the library of. His name was Joseph Delestre, D-E-L-A-I-S-T-R-E. We found all the biographical details about this man. He was born in Paris on the 10th of January, 1726, and he died in Poitiers in 1801. So this is somebody that really is born at the first quarter of the 18th century and dies at the very beginning of the 19th century. So you see, we're way out of Marais' lifetime. So what François-Pierre Gois did, once the book got to the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, we had no idea who copied it. We're looking, is it Marais? No, it's not Marais. All sorts of ideas. François-Pierre Gois said anybody that had copied in such a beautiful calligraphy and had been so careful about all the fingerings, ornaments, could only be a viol player and must have copied other manuscripts, which is the kind of thing that François-Pierre Gois thinks about, but Dunford does not think about. So Gois pulled out some of the other books from the 18th century that the Bibliothèque Nationale de France had. And what did he see? He saw that there's two other books that were copied by the same person. And I'll tell you this anecdote, which is not musicology, but just a funny story, is that we had one of the other manuscripts in our house in photocopies, and we had been clearing out our house to put things in storage. And I had the thing, I kept it up aside because one of my friends plays the part of Sud de Viol. I said, oh, he'll like that. And I had not noticed that the table on that photocopies was the same writing as the book that we required. But François-Pierre Gois figured that out. And when he opened it up, he found that the VMC 6275, which is a part of Sud de Viol book, was copied out by Monsieur Villeneuve. Now, Monsieur Villeneuve must have been a hell of an amateur viol player, but he was not a professional. He was baptized in Paris in the 8th of November, 1706, and he became an advocate in Parliament and was knighted in 1729 and having brought as a charge of counselor to the Great Council. So he was sort of a advocate in Parliament, a kind of legal person. That might explain, I'm just saying this, my own opinions, that's why the book was in this huge legal form and looked like the other registers that I've seen in the Chateau de Chantilly by lawyers or for paying musicians or whatever. Villeneuve resigned from Parliament in 1771 due to political disagreements and retired to a castle called Villeoiseau, which still exists. It's in the very far suburbs of Paris. And he died there in 1771. So this Mr. Villeneuve copied out this bass viol book, copied out a partition book, also of Marais pieces, only Marais pieces, and finally, very much later, he copied out more Marais pieces for partition de viol and some Corelli pieces. The partition book is dated 1759. So we're in the second half of the 18th century, and that's way after Marais' demise. For the bass book, we haven't been able to determine exactly when it was copied out, but there are watermarks, and it's all hypothetical for the time being. We're not sure if it's really for sure or not for sure, but the person who made the paper is called Pierre Cousson, and they were active in the second quarter of the 18th century. They think possibly 1738, 1740 would be the date of the copying of the manuscript, which means that also the manuscript was compiled after Marais had already disappeared. Villeneuve, by the way, is a name that we find in a gigue la Villeneuve, in Marais' music. We don't know if this Villeneuve mentioned in Marais' music is actually the person who copied out this music, or son or father or whatever. So that's all hypothetical for the time being. Now what's very important is Hazel Miloradovich, who's a colleague musicologist, had written a long article, a study on the Partition manuscript that you can find in the Villa de Gamba Safari journal. And she had studied the 1759 Partition arrangements by Villeneuve of Marais and the 1762 arrangements of Marais and Corelli. So what's interesting is obviously this Mr. Villeneuve was a passionate viol player, and he's tried to pass his passion for the bass viol in the 1730s, 40s, when the bass viol was sort of disappearing in France. And obviously that didn't work. And he, like Quai de Valois or even Forqueray or Roland Marais, lots of other composers, started writing for the Partition de viol that came into fashion. And the bass viol book, we acquired it, but obviously there's very few people playing the bass viol when he was probably having friends at home and making them enjoy this ancient music already. It was 50 years ancient music already. You must know this, but I will quote this, that Forqueray's son, wrote a dedication, what's it called, dedication, an introduction to his viol pieces in 1747. And he says, "The viol, in spite of its qualities, has fallen into forgetfulness. Your taste, Highness, may return it to the fame which enjoyed for so long, and may also stimulate emulation in those who cultivate music." So here we are in 1747, and it's obviously that Forqueray's son is saying, as I said, that the viol is disappearing. This is also the time that Hubert Leblanc wrote the Défense de la basse de viol, contre les entreprises, the defense of the bass viol, the 1740s, the time where the bass viol is disappearing. What's interesting is that a lot of composers did take bass viol music and then adapt them for the Partition de viol. We found another manuscript, which is probably less interesting to you, but interesting to me, in Lyon, which is Capus, who was a late French composer from 1730s. His son sold a book of partition arrangements of his father's works and Marais' works in the 1760s. So that's another indication of what was happening about the bass viol disappearing. What we could see this in the context of what was happening in musical terms in France also is that in France in the 18th century, the Italian violin had become much more à la mode, as we say here, much more important, and started taking over the place of the viol. And the viol players, I guess, were very jealous or sad or whatever. And here, Hazel Miloradovich, I want to quote what she says: "The taste for Italian music is certainly reflected in Villeneuve's transcriptions." She's talking, of course, about the partition transcriptions because she had not yet seen the bass viol book. By his additions of many Italian-style ornaments to Marais' pièce de viol, Villeneuve had in effect rendered Marais' music more Italian. Coincidentally, fulfilling Daquin's wish about his music expressed in 1754, 5 years before the dating of the Pardieu Villeneuve Manuscript. He says, finally, Marais appeared on the musical scene. He developed the art of the viol to its limits. Perhaps he would have become even greater had he familiarized himself with Italian music, but when this taste for Italian music came to France, it was too late for him. So I am making a hypothesis, which is absolutely a hypothesis that needs to be proven as anything by many other scientists, musicologists, that this book was really a way of Italianizing Marais' music to make it more à la mode for the people in France in this 1730, 1740 Paris. We're not sure, and I'm sure as the book has just got to the Bibliothèque Nationale, we'll have more and more people that are going to be able to look at it and study it. And my paper is just the beginning of a long adventure. And I hope as many people, musicians, not only viol players, but other musicians, singers, whatever, will study it. Because really, I don't think any manuscript had so many markings till Beethoven came along and started marking metronome and articulation and whatever. And I dare say that this manuscript has even more markings than even lots of Beethoven manuscripts. So with no ado, I'm going to now try to share my screen. So you may not see me anymore. You may see me very small. And I will show you pictures and comment the pictures. Evie, please keep your microphone on, because if my voice cuts off, I'll have no idea.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I will now try to share my screen. You're seeing nothing interesting. Now I'll start from the first slide. Can you see the slide, Evie?
Yeah, okay.
So this is the front cover of the book when we first saw it at the auction house. Accueil, this is Recueil de plus belles pièces de viol. It's a collection of the most beautiful pieces of viol by Monsieur Marais. That's the side. This is another picture of it in the auction house. That's me behind it, so maybe it gives you some idea of the monstrous size of this. Christophe Kwan once dumped it on my lap, and I think he almost broke my knees. So that's the thing you want to carry around in the underground, I'll tell you. Here's a picture of Christophe and I before the pandemic. If you're saying we don't have masks, it was before the pandemic, enjoying our acquisition for the French Gamba Society. And we had a meeting at the French Gamba Society at the church where Marais was a student at Église Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois. And now you see again this monstrous side of this book. This is the very first page. And you see again, it's the collection of the most beautiful pieces for the viol by Marais with the ornaments. And if you look above where it says Recueil, if you look right above, you can see a mirror image where it says Ex Libris de l'Est, which is on the next page. What's important also is that there's another book in Rochester, New York, which we call the Sibley book, which is a printed book of Marais' music. And de l'Est also owned the same book. He owned the Sibley book, which also has markings, not as many, it's 70 or so. and he owned this one. And Deleste, for the time being, we have not found any vials. Villeneuve had at least 3 bass vials we found in his inventory after death. So here, this is the table I was talking to you about. Most of the stuff that's on the left is stuff that's already in Marais' book, but there's some new symbols. If you look at the left column, you'll see there's a thing PPD, which means a way of placing your fingers above or below these fingers. That's already not in Marais' books. If you look at the bottom of the left column, you see SUP, soup. That's supposition. That means you should have to lean for a long time on the trill before playing the trill. It's what we call the pot de voix. Maybe you use that in English. DB, which is in the right column, means demeurer sur la basse. That means stay on the bass for a longer time. GS means garder de supérieur, which means that you hold the top part of the chord. But these, as I said, are very, very summary things, and each page gets more and more involved. And as I said, there's a few 300 symbols. Here in this slide, on the left, we have the Par-dessus book, which I told you I had in my house in photocopies. And I did not realize, my God, look at the right side, that's the table for the new bass book. And you can see it's the same class thing with the same chapters. It tells the bass book which original book, the Marais' book, was the piece, and it will tell you which page. And also he divides them up in different tonalité. Key. Thank you, Sylvia. In different keys. And you see the same thing with the Par-dessus book. Also, they're using all this 17th century terminology, which is J, Ré, Sol mineur, which is not G minor, but G, D, G minor, sometimes with a third, a major third or minor third. So it's 18th century, but still using a lot of 17th century terminology. This is just very quickly. I'm sure it's very little on a lot of your computer screens. This is only a set one of 2 of 7 pages where I wrote out in my article every last marking that was in the manuscript. Most of them we don't know what some mean at all. And I said it's sort of like imagine when NASA goes to Mars and they'll bring back a rock. Everybody will be very excited in science, but won't figure all about what it's all about for years afterwards. And this is the same thing. It's really a Rosetta Stone of discovery, and years and years and years of work to be done on this manuscript. Now I'm going to turn the screen saving off because I want you to listen to Sylvia. So arrêtez le partage. That doesn't work. I can't turn the screen saving off. 1 second. I don't know why I can't turn the screen saving off. Okay, there. Am I big again? Are we big? Okay. Sylvia's going to play a little extract. Do you want 2 more? Okay. She's going to play an extract of the carillon, the cloche carillon, which means the bells, which is from the 2nd book of the Marais pieces. Sylvia's viol is a 17th century French viol, which is perfect for Marais. So we're lucky that we have it, and lucky Sylvia has such an object. I'll turn her microphone back on. Just place your notes to make sure your microphone's working, Sylvia. Just in it. Is it okay, Ibib? Can you hear Sylvia? Okay. So
occasionally there's a slight feedback coming from you when you're turning around or talking to Sylvia. So I don't think it's anything major, but just so you're aware.
Okay, I will not talk, and Sylvia will play just this one line of the carillon. Okay, now I'm going to turn back on the screen sharing. And now, if you want, you can unmute your microphones, but 1 second, I'll explain something, and then everybody can ask questions, because this is going to be, for me, the most fun part. Oops, the wrong piece. Back. So, if you see can you all see the manuscript? Hello?
Yep, I can.
Okay, good. Uh, so these, you see above each note, there's a B. And these B's mean bondissant. Bondissant means pouncing or leaping in English. We spent a long time thinking about what a bondissant could be. And we realized, I told Evie a few days ago, we finally have a hypothesis, which can be proven or not proven, that the bondissant is a French way of saying the terminology for spiccato. Spiccato, you're not going to say in French. So if you're trying to keep a little bit of the French and not Italian, although Villeneuve does use Italian terms sometimes, which Marais never used. So you see, he wanted to have this leaping bow on each bow stroke. And we've tried to figure out how to do the bow stroke. And I think one of the most convincing descriptions was from a violinist that said that you have to think of a plane that's going to London and realizes as they're touching down that no, they were supposed to go to Bristol. So they take off again. So you sort of land and the bow goes flying back up again. I don't know if you can see Sylvia. Can you see Sylvia or no?
Not at the moment because we've got your...
The plane. So maybe I could do a way that we could have this thing on the screen, even small. Can you see Sylvia now?
No, well, I can't, I'm afraid. I don't know about everyone else. Can you see Sylvia? You'll need to find the page that has Jonathan and Sylvia, which probably...
Actually, we saw better with the page full screen, and we could see Sylvia in the vignette on the side.
Okay. So
the format.
So I'll go back to the slide just one more time, and maybe if you won't be able to see Sylvia, but she's going to play the same extract now, that you can see, with no, as Marais wrote it, with nothing in, no B's, none of these bow strokes. Okay, so you can unmute your microphones, but I'll explain a little bit. So you have all these bondissants. Then on the second measure, you see jeter. Jeter means to throw the bow, jeter. And then the fourth measure is something Marais already have, en plein. That means to play all of the notes together instead of arpeggiating them. And the rest are, fort, aigu, loud, and soft. So if you want to unmute your microphones, and if you have any questions just about this B symbol already, I'd love to have some input, especially from anybody that wants to say something. Can you hear me?
Yep.
The audience, does anybody have Susanna, and if Bettina's there, or any of my other colleagues, or anybody out there, if anybody has a question about these B's?
In the original, it says gay.
Right. And here it doesn't say gay.
Yeah. Dum, 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 bum, dum, 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 dum.
That's interesting, and I hadn't noticed that, and I have noticed that in other pieces that the arabesque, which we'll look at later, the tempo is different from what the printed version is. One thing that might have something to do with this, we've noticed by the amount of extra notes added in the pieces, it was very apparent to me and to Sylvia also, and to Christophe Coin, who has played the pieces, that they must have had a much, much slower tempos in this time than we play them nowadays. So that might be an explanation, but to have all these B's, maybe a very fast tempo with B's, God, holding the bow underhand and doing spiccato, God, that is quite a feat, I'll tell you. Any other questions? I hear somebody turn the microphone on, but no question. One thing I'll make a remark is that the B symbol is only found for the time being in Villeneuve's own manuscripts. That means this bass viol manuscript and the partition manuscript. And some people say that maybe this was Marais played this way. But on the other hand, Marais kept his music at home, his printed plates, and he changed fingerings and slurs and other things that he forgot, ornaments. So he could have easily added the B. And also afterwards, Roland, his son, published music, never used the B. Capus published in 1730 and never used the B. Or Forqueray in 1747, Daudet, all these viol composers. So I can't imagine really that Marais was at the origin of the B, why he would not have used it in some form or another, or at least his family would have used it in some form or the other. But that's also a hypothesis, but seems a little logical, as that it's only in these Villeneuve books. If there's no other questions, I'll go into the next extract.
Jonathan, one thing, I just wonder, in what musical circumstances does he use the B symbol? Is it always something like this, which could be bell-like, giving the sense of the attack of the carillon?
You'll see, but coming up, it gets, sometimes it's totally, it defies any logic. This is totally logical. It's a bell-like sound. But where he uses it sometimes, and in conjunction with other symbols, God knows what he had in mind, really. So you'll see. This is the easiest one to understand because it's bell-like and bouncing the bow, and I think that's pretty clear. Any other questions?
Could I ask another, just a very quick one?
Go ahead.
It's very interesting. You get 4 of these bondissants. Then you have 4 bondissants that are also jetés. And I'm slightly puzzled exactly what the difference is when you add a bondissant on top of a jeté.
Oh, in fact, no. The second measure is jeté for the first note, the 8th note, crotchet, I think you call it in English and not in American. And the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th beat of the second measure are bondissants. The jeté is only applicable to that first note.
Okay.
So you have B, B, jeté.
Right. Okay. What about in the 4th measure where it goes en plein as well as being bondissant? And that's...
You got it. Here, Sylvia does it. They're bouncing bow and playing all the notes together. That is one hell of a bow technique.
That's difficult.
Sylvia's getting tendonitis from preparing this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any more questions, or I'll go on to the next?
One thing only. Yes. Also, in the original version by Marais, the note with the first note of the second bar has not the pause. So the jeté is also underlined in some way by the pause. It must be really very short.
Right, right, exactly.
It's written as in Marais' version.
Sylvia has the original here, so look at the original. Oh yeah, the original is just a quarter note.
Yeah.
So this is obviously a adaptation, whether under Marais' influence, I doubt it, or Villeneuve's idea of what we should do with this thing. Also, you know, it's the cloche au carillon, and he just calls it le carillon. So, you know, already he's changed things around from Marais' original intention. And as I said, he's very careful to put all the other things exactly, E's, fingerings, other symbols, exactly as Marais put them. So in any case, I'll go on to the next slide. This is a piece we all know very, very well. And I'll take the screen sharing off so you can see Sylvia play her beautiful instrument. Let's see. Stop that. And am I big again?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Thank you, my dear. And now we'll have also, just an anecdote is the painting in bois is of Marais, and we spent a lot of time studying it. And a lot of people, a lot of viol makers and museums think the painting, the viol in the painting is the one that Sylvia has. It's not 100%, but because one builder said it's very close, but no cigar, as we say. But that it's nice to dream, at least, that maybe that would be the case. Okay, we'll go back to slideshow. So here in the arabesque, somebody asked me a question 5 seconds ago about why the gay was missing. Look at l'arabesque. The original does not say fièrement.
Légèrement.
Oui, the original says, but Marais' printed version says légèrement, lightly, and this just says fièrement, which means proudly. So there's a difference in character from the Marais printed version from the Villeneuve version. So here we're asking about bees and things. The first thing where I put this arrow is called jeté soutenu. So you have to throw the bow but keep it thrown. So what does that mean exactly? I can see Sylvia
I think
with
it's
this. She
because
thinks it
of
means.
because of the ornament, because there is an ornament, so it can't be jeté. It should be.
Yeah, I see. Instead of throwing it up in the air, like we saw before, with the rest afterwards, it's to hold it through. All this is we as I said, we've been on it for a year and a half, and these are just our ideas. I'm sure other people have as good as ideas, and we'll figure this out, all of us collectively, one of these days. Then we get in measure 3. We have 2 bondissants, as we've seen before. Now, yeah. Now in measure 4, we have plaqué. Plaqué is something that's still in the French language. Usually you say, your friend is really angry and he runs off and you say, il m'a plaqué. That means he left me. But plaqué obviously means the same thing as en plein, or doesn't mean the same thing as en plein, because often we'll find plaqué, which means to play all the strings together, and en plein, which means to play all the strings together in the same piece. So what do you want? So here's what we're always starting with, these horrible B's combined with other things. So we get to measure 1, 2, 3, 4. We have a B and we have a plaqué. So we have to do the thing as we did before in the carillon with the 2 things at once. And we'll look at the next slide also, because that's another part of the arabesque. Here we have where the blue arrow is, the demeurer sur la basse. That means stay on the bass before going to the top. So demeurer sur la basse. And if you look at the next system with the green arrows, it says GS, garder le supérieur. That means that you should play the bottom quickly and spend more time on the very last top note. So it's a distinction of whether to arpeggiate quickly or arpeggiate slowly. And now the person who asked me about the bondissant, look at the green arrow. You have a bondissant, a and what we call an expression. I'm using expression now because in this book they call the E expression. And Marais, in one book for the Sonnerie Sainte-Geneviève, calls it expression also. And I think it's better because it's not always as swell. Here it is as well. So Sylvia, could you possibly play the bay and the enflé at the same time? Yeah, so that's quite a number to do. Same thing, I'll stay on this slide, and if you have any questions about this other things, cadence brillante, you see at the end of the second system. There's another jeté soutenu on the second system, etc., plaqué. If you have any, also, sorry, 1, 2, 3 measures on the last system, you have the expression, and a supposition, that means you have to stay on the leading note of the trill. Yeah, that's the supposition, so da. So do you have any questions about l'arabesque, any of you out there?
Jonathan, I have a question, and it's not to do with the solo part, but it's actually to do with the continuo part. Because as you know, in the 5 books that were printed, Marais was very meticulous in notating the figured bass, and he said, well, I've spent ages for book 1 getting the figured bass right, and it came out in a different year and all that kind of thing. But I noticed here that there are no numbers at all in the bass line, and I think it was like that in the carillon as well. Do you have anything to say about the continuo part in this book? Are they all like that?
All of them are like that, and I don't know why, except that probably, I remember one of my teachers at the New England Conservatory said that there's a piece with Corelli where there's one figure one time, he said, and it's in Italian, for the simple-minded.
Does it tell you anything perhaps about how these pieces might have been performed in Villeneuve's or Delettres circle, maybe, perhaps with only 2 viols?
Maybe. Somebody has something to say.
Yes, I agree about that.
Yeah, because for instance, at Quai de Villeneuve, we're working on the 4th book. There's a duo for 2 viols like that with no figured bass, so it's just the same kind of thing. So I think, yeah, that would be a reasonable hypothesis that it was just performed for 2 viols like that. There's 4 pieces that have no bass line at all. And those 4 pieces are the pieces that are new, unedited pieces. One of them is called the Siamoise, and that unedited piece is both in the Villeneuve bass book and the Villeneuve partition book. So the 4 unedited pieces have, for some reason, no bass written at all. What's nice about this book, though, is even if it's not a figured bass, it's to have a score. And I've always thought that Marais, unlike Forqueray or Quai de Villeneuve or Dolé, printed them in separate books as a commercial venture because he had to sell 2 books. You can't buy one without the second one. I'm not sure, but that might seem to be a logical assumption. And it's so nice, finally, instead of having a modern edition, here we have all these pieces, 203 pieces with a score form, which will make it much easier for people to play the music with a friend. Other question? Susanna Brauman, are you still there? I'd love to have some colleagues weighing in on this. Bettina Hoffman, I don't know if she ever showed up.
Yeah, she asked you a question earlier, I think, or she made a comment.
Okay. Bettina, do you have anything to say about this? Because I think plaqué and all that, do you have any ideas?
There are also a couple of questions in the chat if someone can monitor the chat.
Oh, I can't really do the chat and the slide at the same time because I have no chats up here. So if you could do it verbally, because I'd have to go off the slide to look at the chat.
Yes, I think a lot of the comments, I can't see any particular questions. A lot of it was from me, just actually confirming what you have said with regards to the symbols, because some of it is quite small. So when you were explaining DB just now, I was just affirming the fact that it's letter B followed by B and GS and that kind of thing.
Yeah, the GB is with a blue arrow.
Yeah.
And GS is with this green arrow.
And then the last thing I wrote was of a bande son plus an expression. So that's what the E B plus E means.
That's right. It's a little Lego. You could put all these things together. Lots of B, E, jeter. I think the craziest one is called jeter étouffé. That means to throw and strangle. What does that mean? You throw the bow and you just stop it in the string or whatever? Or is it evidence the mafia was throwing people out of windows? Oh, that's a bit. Any other questions?
I have a question about the DS part. Would you consider this as a kind of a rule, or is it just exceptionally done here and it's not quite ordinary to play it in this kind of way?
Sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of the first part of your question.
So I was saying, like, the DS part, the chord with the DS or DB, sorry.
DB.
Yeah. So is it something which is common there, or is it quite exceptional and it's not common in the rest of the book? Or
it's used all over the book, but it's like all French things. It's used with nuance and subtlety. It's used where it should be used in sort of the same aesthetic as all the music from Versailles. No, so the GS and DB is used very, very often, but in the right places. And I said also Villeneuve sometimes harps on a point. For instance, the whole thing in my article where he have all these different kinds of throat bow, the jeté, and he uses jeté soutenu, jeté sec, jeté. So he seems to harp on the point to sort of emphasize that particular technique. But it really is very elegant and very 18th century. In fact, what I want to say also is it reminds me very much of the dynamic contrasts and the articulations and all that we find in Rameau's music, and certainly we find in Capus, which is 1730s music. It's absolutely music of style of playing that was in the mid-18th century that was very in vogue. Even Sturm und Drang in Germany would approach this kind of playing. And I don't really think Marais would have played, especially the music from the first or second book in this way. And it seems his way of playing in the 17th century, that being the 18th century, would not be this sort of newfangled style. I don't know, but that's my gut feeling about it. Should I go to the next slide, or is there another question?
There's one question from Suzanne Brauman. Is there an occasion when en plein and plaqué are combined? Or
yep.
Are alternatives, do you think?
Plaqué combined. Is there one on this page? I don't know, but yeah, that exists. That Lego combination does. Yeah, I know that's bande son et expression. Yeah, that does exist.
I'm not sure about that.
Sylvia's not sure.
No.
Yeah. So Sylvia went through all the 206 pieces also. So let's listen to Sylvia and don't listen to me. Go on to the next page, or more questions about arabesque?
I was just wondering, the plaqué, I haven't seen much of this, but the plaqué seems to be under large chords. And so far I've seen the en plein under like 3-note chords. Maybe plaqué, you're still forced to go like chord.
Oh, that's really smart. Now that's really smart. I never thought of that. Who are you? I can't see who you are.
I'm Anne. I'm in Vancouver in Canada.
Oh, well, that's brilliant. I think we should go. Nobody thought of that. That might be what it is. We have to go and look at all the pieces in context, but I never thought of that. Maybe the plaqué is because it's many notes, and the en plein is when it's just three notes, and the plaqué you still have to do as much as possible and then arpeggiate it.
Yeah, you may have to break it in two to make two en pleins with one. I'm not sure. I'm just looking. It looks like many notes on those, but
Are you French Canada or English?
I'm from French Canada, but I live in English Canada.
Yeah, but what in Canadian French? What does plaqué mean?
We don't use it that much. I mean, it's used for things like if you bash into someone in a sport, you plaqué someone. But I've learned it in piano, where an accord plaqué is one that you play all the notes at the same time, and arpégé is the opposite, is when you play the notes separately.
It's true that en plein, I can see en plein is 3 notes.
Yeah, yes. Somebody just found one that exactly what you said. En plein is 3 notes. You might be onto
In La
something.
Rêveuse, there was a
Wait.
Yeah.
Sylvia, I think you got it. You win the prize. You had won a trip to Paris when the pandemic is over. For 2 people. That's brilliant. That's exactly why I wanted to talk to all you people. That is really. I will look at it. We have to confirm it, but I think you got it. And I had 1.5 years. None of us saw that. Thank you very much.
Sorry to interrupt, Jonathan, but there is another question, a query by the gentleman who asked you about the DS or DB earlier. And Marianne, who's this person, was wondering if the DB would be something that you would recommend to play normally with long chords, I guess large chords. It seems like sometimes it's a style of playing large chords.
That also I have to look at, but it seems to be put down as salt and pepper where he wants. Mace says that if you want to play a chord, you have to spend longer time on the bass, which is the real music, and even swell, and then play the other notes of the chord, which are the false music. So I think it's just basic viol technique. The spending time on the bass, as you know, we see it in many treatises and normal. What I've not seen before is this GS going directly to the top note of the chord. That was new, at least to me. I've heard some viol teachers here in France that have talked about it, but just by their own instinct. So this is historical evidence that, in fact, there were the 2 different ways of playing. But for the time being, I don't know if it has to do with the amount of, like Anne just said, the plaqué or en plein, because of the number of notes in the chord. So that also, as I said, once this manuscript's available to all, we're going to find, just look, Anne found something in 2 seconds. Imagine what's going to happen when we have all this for a few years. It's going to be amazing.
Jonathan, just for information, I've got my Petit Robert in front of me, and it says plaquer un accord en maintenir les notes ensemble avec force.
Yeah, but the Petit Robert wasn't written in 1740. So we looked at dictionaries from that time, and in the article, François Pierrois found the first mention ever of the plaqué in a musical term, and it was in the middle of the 18th century. But plaqué was not a term that was used in music before, I think, 1760 or something like that. So that's, plaqué is in French Canada. She just said that a plaqué is you plaqué against somebody, but here, as I said, often your girlfriend leaves you and says, "Elle m'a plaqué." She left me. That's what we use it mostly nowadays. We don't use it for music, but for bad social situation. Last question before we play another piece. Okay, I'll go on. This is also a big hit, La Rêveuse. Let me take it again. I will disactivate the screen sharing, so if you see Sylvia playing, it's a little bit ashamed to not see her playing. Am I big again?
Yep.
Good. Hit it. Okay, so I'll go back to screen sharing and we'll look at this as best you can on your small screens. A slide, current slide. Oops, this is not the right piece. Go back to the correct piece. So here we have the first note has an expression. Then we have enlever, which means take the bow off the string. Garder le supérieur. Garder le supérieur. Garder le supérieur. Expression, filet. Sorry. Filet means to, Sylvia correcting me on that. I thought filet, but now you say filet means you got to leave. You got to leave. Filet means to play with a. Go ahead, explain it.
Son filet is very narrow.
Narrow sound. So filet, expression. Prochaine, continue, Sylvia. Expression.
C'est enflé. Sorry,
Enflé.
it's enflé.
Expression, jeter, sec. Expression, enlever, garder supérieur, garder supérieur, garder supérieur. Expression, enlever, brandissons avec une supposition. Supposition was leaning on the top note. So again, does anybody would like to ask some questions about this version of La Rêveuse?
Yeah, one question for me very quickly about the E. So I noticed just now that you said expression and Sylvia said enflé or the other way around. So how do you know that it's expression or enflé, or are they interchangeable?
Okay, the term is also because Marais uses three terms. He says E indicates exprimer ou enflé. That's what he says in the third book. Then in this De Gamme et autres morceaux de symphonie, he calls that expression. In this book, they call it expression. So I started using expression because it's a generic term. It just means letter E. That's my definition of what it means, expression, E. Then afterwards, if you have an E at the beginning of the note, that means the E, that's the part of the note that's the loudest. And that we could call an exprimer, which is close to, I think, exclamazione in Italian music, or those triangles that you find in Forqueray or Couperin's music. So sort of an articulation at the beginning of the note, while the E that comes after the note, and as you know, sometimes you have two measures of the same note, and the E will happen at the very end of the second measure of the note. So it's a long swell, and that would be enflé swell. So those are terms that we just started using ourselves, and I'd like to use expression because it's generic, because where the E is on the note will be a very different effect. So if you just play this, she's going to play measure 1, 2, 3, and measure 4, because there's an expression on the enflé. These are my terms. You see what, to make a distinction between the E and measure 3, which is on the C, which is at the beginning of the note, and then the subsequent measure, the G, the C, there's an E that comes after the note, so it's a swell. In fact, Sylvia, could you play that measure 1, 2, 3 with the G and the B flat? Again. So you can hear that the E is the beginning measure is an enflé, if you want to call that a swell. And then the E at the end of the measure on the third beat is an expression, where it's the beginning of the note. It's just like shining light on the note, where the point is.
It's the same in the original.
Yeah, in the original Marais, it's written the same way. If you look at the original La Rêveuse, that's what I was saying, that Villeneuve was very careful to put the E in exactly the same place that Marais had put it. What he added was those B's, which Marais did not use. So you have another question?
Yeah, again, it's from me, sorry. I'm interested in the technique in producing an enflé, and if there's a difference to that of producing an expression at the beginning of a note. Is it to do with bow pressure and speed, or both?
Both.
Yeah, that's Sylvia will answer that.
I would say both. It's mostly speed. For the enflé. And exprimer is more, yes, it's speed and weight.
What I tell my students is just my way of doing it, which is not God's truth, that's what we're doing, is that if you put pressure on the hair before you play, it's called the préparation du coup d'archer. It's sort of like when you have a bow and arrow. So you pull all this tension on the bow, on the hair, and once you have the tension and you let it release it, you can make an attack like precisely at the beginning note. While with the enflé, if you add the pressure and speed the bow up, it's the opposite technique. So one is putting the pressure on the hair before you start the note, and the other one is adding the pressure as you go on. Marais says it's by adding pressure, but if you just add pressure and you don't speed the bow up, it starts sounding not very good. Other question before I go on to the last example?
I have a very quick one. At the very end of that line,
Yeah.
you have a bondissant on an ornamented dotted note with a slur. So how do you do a bondissant when it's slurred and you've got a minim underneath?
And not only that, you have a supposition.
Yeah. Bondissant is the beginning of the note.
So somebody could play a measure? So you hear
Yeah.
again?
Yeah. But it's not bouncing off the string completely. It's just taking the pressure off.
It's the
Sorry,
way.
I'm on share so you can see Sylvia
Yeah.
do this actually. So go ahead, Sylvia.
You know, it's going from up and.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll go back to the screen sharing again, and we'll look at the very last example.
Could I make a quick comment on that, just quick before you
Sure,
go?
sure, go ahead.
It's only a comment really about the lack of figures. But if you think about what figures he would put in there, if you know, if just take the not the first bar, but the second bar where he's got 3 minims. Sorry, I mean you'd only put the sixth in, and that's exactly the top note on the viol.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you put any figures in? You don't really need them. All you're going to play is
I'm accompanying my.
But see, the point is, in the publications, the bass book is quite separate from the treble book, and it's the figures tell you what the treble part is doing. You know, the viol part is doing.
Right, of course.
But you don't need that if you're going to see the whole thing.
Although in this example, I've accompanied Sylvia for many years. You don't need it because you play the same chords. That top part is, and sometimes it's a sixth or a seventh.
I mean,
something like the Labyrinthe, which
I don't think you even have to play the sixth. Actually, you just have to play the third. Because the sixth, it's the viol part has the sixth, and that's really where the fun in the music is.
Right, but I'm saying that in the whole book there are pieces, for instance, the Labyrinth, which is in the book.
Yeah. Now, there are other pieces, but on this sort of piece, it really, it's superfluous.
Yeah, it is superfluous. I guess it really depends if you have what we call in French the pièce d'harmonie, harmonic pieces, or pièce de mélodie, melodic pieces. So here I've never. There's one time I made a mistake. There's this one chord when I didn't have the figures, and I wrote in one figure. But no, you really don't need the figures at all for this. Any other questions before I go to the last example? Because I'm sort of Eva was going to kill me because I'm going way over time here.
We've got 7 minutes before 9:15.
Okay, so
well, I do have one question.
Okay,
my name's Michael Oppenheimer. So two bars before the end of the first line, you have either an enflé or an expression. Now, to me, that's totally ambiguous, because if it's an enflé at the beginning of the note, then you know it's explosion or something like that at the beginning of the note, and probably a diminuendo afterwards. But if it is an expression, you have on such a long note a great amount of discretion as to how you play it, provided you play it expressively. So I'm a little confused about a note like that. With any
when Marais says very carefully in his third book, you do the E where it is placed on the note, at the beginning or on the point, according to the note. But this is in the original book and in this book directly on the note and not after the note. You can see in measure 1, 2, 3 when they place the E after. That means a swell, and you see measure 3. There's an E that's right directly on the note. So
that is certainly the traditional way in which we have always played our enflés. but the fact that the word expression is used brings a degree of ambiguity into it, as it seems to me.
It's like exclamazione.
Exclamazione in Italian. But
well, an exclamazione is generally played or sung at the beginning of the note.
Yeah. Exactly. So
there's never any swell in the middle of the note.
Right, exactly. That's why Marais, I think, says enflé ou exprimé in his third book. Enflé, swell, exprimé, exclamazione. And it's really clear. And also remember that Villeneuve spent painstakingly a lot of time to repeat exactly the E where it should be. And you find them in also Marais' book, especially in the fifth book, where he sometimes puts them at the beginning of the note, sometimes
for sure.
So I really think of it like as a stage actor who's getting a point of light. And with that point of light, that's the loudest point of the note. You're putting the light on that part of the note. But that particular measure you mentioned, the two measures at the end, is definitely at the beginning of the note and not afterwards. In America, where I come from, obviously we've always tried to make swells, but it's obvious that's the E's, that's not really meant. It's funny because the French understand the language, so nobody ever doubted that there was two different kinds of ways of doing the E's. But in America, we've always, at least when I was at the conservatory, we always learned that every E was supposed to be a swell. So,
thank you.
Okay, next and last thing. So this is the best for last. On the top of this, you have Le Voisinel, which is the version from De Lettres, the new book that we bought. And on the bottom, we have the Sibley book, which also has markings. And I put blue arrows where there are differences, because both of them have markings. Some of the markings are similar, some of them are totally different. And Sylvia now will play both of the same thing. I will take the screen sharing off because I want you to see her playing. And so Sylvia will now play.
Which one?
First play the Deleste version, and then she'll play the dust, and then she'll play the second version, which is
the fingerings are different.
Now the Sibley version. Thank you. And now we'll go back to the slide. Oops, that's not my slide. Slide from current slide. Okay, so Sylvia, again, if you go slowly, the first, she'll play the top version, which is the De Lettres. I say De Lettres, but my people who are actually French and not fake French say De Lettres, that manuscript. So Sylvia starts.
So I'm trying to do the fingering.
Which is 1, 2, it's very weird
it's
fingering.
Very complicated.
Exprimé.
Is it exprimé? No, it's enflé.
Oh, oui, enflé, sorry. Fidé. So I missed one enflé also in measure 2. So what's surprising is that what I feel in this version is that en plein, to play so loudly, this is very consistently even the back.
So sorry to interrupt, Jonathan, but it's when Sylvia is playing very low and very loud, and you then address that issue. There seems to be quite a lot of distortion going on as a result of that. I don't know, and there's a comment there saying that they're picking up a little bit of distortion in the sound.
Okay, so yeah, I shouldn't talk while she does it, but she'll play through it again. So the first measure, see en plein, where the first arrow is. Then you have an arrow where there's expression, and the second measure. Then you have an enflé followed by filet, which means to play a narrow sound. The next measure, which is the next to last measure, we have an enflé, and we also have the filet, the narrow sound, and the rest is normal, the way Marais printed it. One more time. I won't talk.
There is still a little bit of distortion there, I'm afraid.
I turned down the gain a little bit. Maybe.
Jonathan, can you possibly experiment? Can you switch your microphone off? I'm wondering whether we're getting interference between your two microphones.
Okay.
So just Sylvia's microphone.
Okay, I could do that. So what you'll do now is the Sibley version, and I won't talk, I'll turn my microphone off, but the green arrows, you see that there's an enflé in the very first measure, which is not in the Deleste version. There's another enflé in this next measure. Then there's another E, this time is an expression on the eighth note. This is the second beat and a half. Underneath it's written M-A-R, which is marqué, which means to mark the sound. Then the very next to last measure, you have prep, which some people think it's preparing the fingers. I think it's préparation de coup d'archet, which you have to prepare the bow, as I said, to do when you do expression, for instance, leaning on the hair before you play. And then the last green arrow is G, which means grand, it means a big bow. So I'll turn my microphone off and let's see if we do this better. And Sylvia will now play Les Voix Humaines, the Sibley manuscript version, Sibley book version. Was the sound better?
Yes, I think it was clearer.
Okay. It is a lot better.
Okay, I turned the microphone off. So, does anybody have any questions, comments, observations about this two different versions with markings, also both from the 18th century by different people, obviously?
Jonathan, I'm just wary about the time, so we've gone past 9:15 London time, and perhaps we could think about wrapping this up soon with the last sort of question and answer discussion session, and then a final word from you.
Thank you. I told you I would go over time. I told you as you want. If you want us, we could say goodbye, or if you want to have one last discussion, questions.
I think we could open up the discussion for one last time. So if there are any questions from anybody.
From a very selfish point of view, you mentioned, Jonathan, that there were some pieces that are unaccompanied and we haven't heard. Could we possibly ask Sylvia to play one of them for us?
There, unfortunately, Paige, I don't know what happened in my iPad, so we're not going to be able to dig them out. Once it gets up on the internet or the facsimile edition, so many people will play. Christophe Point played the Musette at unedited Musette at our French meeting, and I don't know if they put it up on the French Ville de Gamba site. I don't think so. I don't know. Whatever. La Siamoise, the Musette, and then there's a Hondo, and I forgot what the fourth piece is. They sound like Marais. Just they're definitely Marais. They're missing the bass totally. Sorry. Any other questions?
Silence.
Very silent. It's amazing.
do you have anything else you'd like to say to just sum it up before we call it a day?
Yeah, well, to sum it up is I hope that every viol player and every musician can have some this copies of this and start like playing the music. It's really, as you see, it's like having being a beginner again. The pieces that you know so well, like the arabesque or the rêveuse, and you have all these new instructions, and sometimes it has nothing to do with what you ever possibly thought of how to play them. And I think it's a great discovery, and I'm also very happy that it finally ended up in a great library, and that will have a great facsimile edition. And I want to thank all those people out there that helped us buy this incredibly expensive book, because without you, we never could have had it.
It will change the way we play Marais. At least give us a different perspective on how we approach Marais and the symbols in his music. And I think you mentioned the other day that this is also, or maybe I read it in the journal, that this is actually an approach to Marais in the middle of the 18th century, after he had died, and after the Italian influence had clearly took hold on the style of music in France. Is it true that actually some of the pieces even have Italian markings, which you never see in Marais, but actually in one of the pieces there is a marking for example, I don't know, Adagio, was it?
Exactly, Adagio. Yeah, this is my in François theory. It hasn't been proven yet, but we think, and Hazel Miloradovich also, that there's an Italian approach to Marais, and there is Adagio written, and I think there's another Italian term somewhere else that Marais would never have used. And I said also the bondissant, spiccato, the bow techniques and whatever. So maybe some people prove differently afterwards, but I can't imagine really Marais playing Le Tombeau de Mériton in his first book, or even the Fodi d'Espagne with all these crazy bondissants. It seems really much more like a 18th century, middle 18th century new approach, newfangled way of playing the viol. So yes, it will teach us a lot about French music from the 18th century. I don't think that's really going to teach us very much about Marais' actual way of playing. So
yeah, that's really interesting.
That's what I think. That's my opinion. It's from my head. It's not God's truth. It's just what I think.
It's food for thought, certainly for any aspiring Marais performers out there. I think we've come to the end, everybody. So I just first of all would like to say huge thanks to Jonathan and Sylvia for willing to give us this very detailed and very fascinating talk. And maybe we should give a round of applause to both Jonathan and Sylvia. I'm going to wish you all a very good evening, and to say stay safe and well, and to remember that you can keep track of the activities of the UK Viola da Gamba Society from our website, vdgs.org.uk, our Facebook page, and also Twitter. So until next time.
Before he goes, I'd just like to say thank you to him for all the work that's gone into organising tonight's talk. Thank you also, of course, to Jonathan and Sylvia. But this is a bit of an experiment. He's taken the brunt of getting this one up and running, and I think we should all offer him a vote of thanks as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and goodbye. Good night.
Bye. Good evening.
Bye.